Welcome, everyone, for another update on John Urschel's game versus the world. It was a pro-am. We thought so at first, but it turns out the professional is John Urschel, and the amateur is sitting right over here. He's a professional football player by day, but might as well be Batman by night. Are you about to welcome Matt Damon in from Good Will Hunting and get to work on the algorithms behind you?
Oh yeah, I'm ready. We're streaming live from MIT right now.
I love that.
Uh,
That's just like, I mean, seriously, does Matt Damon like ever hang around the campus and just like solve algorithms? No, that's not a thing.
that's not a thing. It should
That's
be.
not a thing.
Should be.
All right, well, where we left off, everybody, was on the position you can see right here. But I'm going to Tarantino this for you and just quickly jump to the end and show you that in the current position, and pretty much all of this work has just been done by John. He's a hard worker, analyzing the position, blowing up my phone via text message as far as his ideas. But really, I feel like I'm just a spectator, and he is currently up a piece against y'all in the live position. Now, 2 pawns for the piece, John. This is going to be far from easy with not a lot of material left. Maintaining winning chances is obviously going to be difficult. But if anybody's in the driver's seat, it's you. And I just can't wait to hear your thoughts on how we got here. So let's go back to the position that we currently left, right?
Yeah. So this.
You
Oh,
had just played queen takes d6 after this idea that we came to together, that once black attacks this knight with the bishop, we needed to stop it with bishop d6. But tell everybody how you felt about this position, especially after the world played queen to c5, and what your general ideas were as far as the direction of the game.
yeah. After they played Queen C5, I really did not like my position as much. I think in hindsight, like we said before, maybe G4 was not the best thing.
Right.
I think when I look at this position, I actually kind of like Black's position a little better. But I mean, here,
What made you say that you liked the world's position against you here?
well, I like the world's position here because, well, the queen there was somewhat of a stronghold, but they've kind of immediately displaced it. And really, I've got a lot of things that are kind of not as strong as they are. They have that bishop on that long diagonal, the B1 to H7 diagonal, which looks very strong. Their knight on F6 has great places to play, things like D5, also E4. And my knight on A3 is like worthless right now, especially because the C2 square is being attacked by that bishop.
You know, I totally agree with you. It seems tough, and at first when they simplified this way, I was like, uh-oh,
Yeah.
we're losing the thread on this position. If you missed our last video, everybody, you should definitely go back and check it out. There were some instructive moments if you're an ambitious chess player talking about the pitfalls of, following a percentage in a database, a move that scores well, and then maybe upon further review it doesn't. But I think the position is still pretty dynamically equal despite that, John, and honestly, you have the big long-term advantage here in the position, regardless of the current issues of, this knight being displaced, the activity. When I talk about the long-term advantage, what am I kind of talking about?
Well, I think the thing that I really tried to take advantage of in this position is what I tried to look at was try to keep a strong position and simplify and use the advantage that I have on the queen side, my pawn majority.
Awesome.
That was,
Again,
that was the game plan.
dude, when you become a grandmaster, will you let me know what it feels like? No, you're absolutely right. And that's a good lesson for everybody. And not to say that the temporary tactics or the initiative don't amount to things, but if you can weather the storm and keep an eye on the forest through the trees, right, the bigger picture, that's kind of what John does here. So you played queen to d4. I think that's an excellent move. Taking on c5 and reaching the endgame the same way, everybody.
On C5, I'm in.
Right.
I'm in.
It's like the equivalent of trading rooks on an open file, right? Your opponent will always take second, and then they own the file. So, this was a really good move, and it showed maturity. I like it.
Mhm.
They castled.
Castle.
You castled, right?
I'm not taking that queen.
No, you're playing chicken right now. You're like Kevin Bacon, who got his foot stuck on the tractor,
Right.
and
So,
that way you can't turn. But then the lady still thinks that you have like a heart of a lion, even though you just accidentally got your foot stuck on the tractor, right?
there you go.
Right. But no, I love it. You're not blinking, and eventually they blink first
Mhm.
in this game of chicken.
And
And honestly, that's huge, right? Because
Yeah.
now you're able to take with the rook, and I don't.
what I think is like amazing about this is they take the queen now as opposed to before, and now
Right.
all of a sudden, like I didn't. This didn't make sense. The D file's mine.
Mm-hmm.
Like I own that thing.
Yep. And you're only going to support it with the second rook. So and again, like we're doing this cold turkey, just me and you with our chess brains. I haven't looked at this with the engine. I have no idea. But I agree that this just like, honestly, I don't know what else the engine would suggest here, but I feel like you definitely won out there. And if I was black, I would have maybe considered keeping the queens on the board. I think your biggest issue of the knight on a3 becomes less relevant, as you said, as the position simplifies and as you own the d file.
Yeah.
So I don't know what else were they supposed to do, but I guess if they traded before, maybe they were worried about you gaining a tempo on the rook with the bishop.
Yeah.
Again,
Yeah.
this is a really important thing to talk about here, John, because not only do you have the 3-on-2 majority, but I think part of the problem with black's position is despite that temporary kind of, they're kicking you back with queen to c5 and how it didn't feel good, not only do you have the 3-on-2, but these pawns are overextended.
Yes.
And this is like Sicilian gone wrong 101. I've experienced these kind of games myself, taught it to students that even if somebody's castled long, the moment these pawns that have extended so aggressively become targets, they're overextended and they're vulnerable. I mean, just as an example, like natural moves would just fail in this kind of position because of the bishop's threat. So this is a really good lesson for everybody that generally the end game for black, after you've overextended the queenside pawns, can be very dangerous. And that's kind of what happened here, at least at first, because they were afraid of making that queen trade. But now you've got the d file, and so tell me what you were thinking here after rook f to d1. I mean, what are your thoughts now?
Well, rook f to d1. These are natural moves. I'm claiming the file. They have to do something because while their rook can no longer stay on that file, he has to either take or move.
Right.
So I'm going to really stake claim to that d file in a long-term way.
Love it. Yeah, and the d file is super critical now because we talked about files being like commodities, right?
Yeah, exactly.
The financial structure that is different than any other sort of investment is commodities are based purely on supply and demand. Mm-hmm. The less there are on the board, the more valuable they are. If you own that d file, right? Mm-hmm. You're golden. So he took it.
Yep.
Or sorry, not he, she. The world is a gender neutral.
Now I took back with the rook to hold on to that
the d file,
and I had calculated what they would do when they played knight d3 after that, and I thought I'd be fine.
Okay, so what were the lines? Give everybody an idea of the depth that you were going into, because you are working incredibly hard. So what was your? Obviously, we see the line you played. You played rook d6 here. We kind of got a trade.
I played rook d6, but I thought about like a bunch of other things. I calculated. Okay. I thought about pawn b3. I thought about things like, what else did I think about? I thought about one more thing. I thought about, hey, how's it going, man?
Okay, there they know that you're live to millions of chess.com members. Do they want to say hi? Who is it?
Oh, it was grad student.
Grad student.
Yeah. Let's see. I definitely thought about b3. I thought about rook d6. And maybe I thought about...
I was wondering if you were considering this idea at some point.
I think that might have been one of the other lines I was considering. And I also thought about pawn b4.
Okay.
As well. So I thought about those four, I think.
Those all seem like reasonable candidate moves. I think instinctively, if I look at all of them before I even analyze deeply, you're the one who was doing most of the deep work. As your coach, I'll say that I think rook d6 does seem like the best move instinctively off the top of my head. Mm-hmm. But knight h4 is probably my number two, and the reason is that without doing a lot of calculating, I guess I'm kind of assuming that the elimination of this bishop for the knight, mm-hmm. combined with the opening of this bishop, I have a very hard time believing I'm not going to end up with a position where two of my pawns fall, but also both of these pawns fall, which leaves me with an outside pass pawn. I'm not sure if that's going to be the C or the A pawn. But okay, now I'll start calculating to see if I'm right, just with the intuitive idea. I capture and maybe immediately enter. Mm-hmm. I'm thinking of, the fact that they can't come to the C file. I start looking quickly at ideas like this. And, okay, what's funny is I can't take with the knight. I'm just realizing that now. And actually, that's kind of irritating because we don't want to lose the bishop. But I just want to point out that probably an endgame like this, still it offers white as the only person who could win, right? The outside pass pawn, it's already sort of mobile. But likely this is a much better version of the endgame they got against you for them, because you have a knight instead of the dominant potential bishop, who was just such a beast potentially in this position, right? Made it very dangerous.
Yeah.
One thing for everybody, I can say that
calculated this better than I did at the time. I did calculate, these lines like here,
okay,
here, here, and then when we got to this type of position, I was not quite in love with this. And actually, I was looking at
oh, you know what?
him taking the
Looking at
pawn
this.
and also the rook going to a8. I was looking at those two lines.
Wow, actually, it looks like you're totally right. In fact, black's pieces are much better coordinated, and white's losing material. So that's where Danny's intuition will get you.
Yeah, so that's what I thought about that position.
Okay, it's fantastic. So you kind of go for this similar idea in that, you look to trade off a couple pawns for a couple pawns on the queen side, but but you're keeping this bishop, which is going to be really important. In a real game, looking at knight h4, I guess instinctively, like, we know why I consider this move, right? Because this bishop has been such a thorn. It's such an annoying piece and also we know that if we can get the imbalance of our bishop versus a knight without the counterpart challenging our counterpart, we know we're better. But you were able to do that really in a different way, which I think is even better. So let's talk about the other moves you considered. So why did you end up dismissing b3 and b4? Was there something bad you saw about them, or did you just like rook d6 better?
Not very good at all, and it's been a while since I analyzed it, but I believe the move was c1, knight c1, that leads to troubles, and I think I'm actually losing a pawn there, perhaps.
So like that's on b3 or b4?
B3.
Right, and so you go here, which is a fork to the e2 square and the a2 pawn.
Exactly. And then
and then it looks like they're bringing their knight. I guess you probably looked at some things where they bring their knight in. Oh, wow, and look at this. They have this very maybe interesting tactic where you can't take either knight because of a fork.
Oh, I did not see that.
That would have been sassy. Sassy McGee right there. But, okay, it doesn't matter because...
Yeah, it just looks bad.
Yeah, just bad. And so b4 is probably bad for similar reasons, and even more so just because positionally... Now this pawn is backward. I mean, if a logical move like this already causes problems, right?
Yeah.
Then,
although it should be noted that throughout this, the one nice tactic not a tactic, the one thing I have is they can move that rook to wherever they want on the eighth.
Right, on the eighth rank.
On the eighth rank, but they can't use it yet.
Right, because of the back rank.
Because of the back rank.
Very, very important observation.
So that's one thing I kept in mind throughout this analysis.
That's a super important observation, and again, even though we agree b3 and b4 are bad for different reasons, mainly the knights get jiggy with it on these squares, and it's a problem anyway. But I agree with you. All right, so let's do with what you did here. I mean, you're in the driver's seat, and I love it. Takes and takes. Bishop d3 makes sense, right?
And, it's just continuing on.
So you played rook a5, right?
Rook a5. There were a couple other moves I could have made, but some of these things got a little complicated, and I thought rook a5 was simple and got me to a position I really liked. And I felt more confident in my calculation there. I looked at tactics like knight takes b5, followed by knight takes b5.
Oh, knight takes b5.
Followed by rook b6. But it looked a little messier to me. And so I thought about that one. I thought about rook a5 instead of going knight takes b5. And then I also looked at rook b6 as well.
But this looks like it a little bit less good because of knight a4, right? Forking the rook and the pawn.
So that one was out. Really, it went down to rook a5 or knight takes b5 with that tactic.
Okay.
I thought rook a5 was better at the time.
Well, I think you're probably right. I think one very forcing line is if they go for this whole thing, it's kind of just a big fancy trade, right?
Exactly.
Sometimes a cute little tactic like that looks sexy because we sacked a piece, to
Yeah.
start it. But the truth is,
It's a trade. The one thing I like
right.
about it is I do get that past a pawn,
Hmm.
but in the other line, I thought I had chances to win a pawn.
Yes.
So
Right. Your
that
goal
took
is,
that one.
and that's a really important, I guess, let's say, attitude to elaborate on real quick for the
Yeah.
viewers. When you have let's say, it's like the same mindset you apply to having an isolated queen pawn, John. Like, if you're the one playing against an isolated queen pawn and you've been like strangling your opponent, slowly surrounding the pawn, like simplifying properly, like you're gonna win positionally, right? Like Karpov. You're playing like a boa constrictor and you're strangling the positional weakness. And then at some point, like you let your guard up and just quickly they manage to trade that weak pawn for any one of your pawns. Doesn't matter how out of play the pawn is, like a corner pawn. You always feel like you let yourself down, right? Because
Right.
you let them trade positionally weak, hugely like dysfunctional part of their position for a healthy pawn.
Hmm.
And if you have, so this isn't exactly the same because you could argue that your pawns are just as isolated as their pawn, right? The A and the C pawn. So it's not like you're trading isolated for isolated pawn.
Hmm.
But I still think it's the right mindset to be like, look, if I can find a way to win the pawn outright, because you have the initiative on that side of the board, you're already hitting the pawn. You've got the rook very active, as you
And
pointed out.
also,
Their rook
their rook is
is
not as scary as it seems.
right. Their rook at best is sort of bluffing at the threat of this, at least currently, because of the back rank.
Yeah.
So, that's why I like knight a5, regardless of the fact that I think just accurate calculation tells us you were right, and this would just be a fancy trade.
Hmm.
I think that it's the right mindset anyway, so I'm just kind of acknowledging you for that and providing some education to our members. I think that's the right idea.
Okay.
I also want to point, I'm not sure how much bigger picture, sometimes when we're not sure of the road to take, we do want to fall back on the strategical positional thinking or advice we've been given. Like, what kind of endgame am I shooting for? Do I want a rook ending? Do I want a bishop for a knight imbalance? Do I want this or that? And that's where, like, the more we study endgames and the more technical knowledge we give ourselves, the better we become, because sometimes if it seems like there's many confusing roads, all you can do is go back to like advice you've been given. And that one piece of advice is, if you have an initiative on a side of the board, you should look to strangle your advantage, not trade out your advantage and give them something in return. But the other piece of advice I was going to offer is this: like, so if you're shooting for bishop versus knight, I'm going to quiz you here.
Okay.
What is it about? A two-part question. What is it about the bishop versus knight imbalance that you were attracted to, that you were aiming for? And what is it about, like this line, for example, that to me would suggest that it's not as good of a version of the bishop versus knight? There's something black can do in this particular position that's a really good general endgame, improve John's chess knowledge kind of question.
Okay, let me think.
Okay, go ahead.
What can black do here?
By the way, it's not a concrete tactical threat. I'm more asking you, like, there's an important thing that black can do here that kind of like can't be challenged by you, which would be really irritating as far as the bishop's potential advantage over the knight. Maybe I'll answer the first part first. Why do we want the bishop over the knight in this type of endgame? Like, what's the feature here that says bishop should be better than knight?
Well, generally, I mean, I'm not as good as you on these things, but generally my feelings are I have this pass pawn. It's a far pass pawn. And one of the best things about a bishop versus a knight is its ability to cover large distances quickly.
Right.
And we've got this pass pawn all the way on the other side. And we've got the meat of things on the king side and the bishop's ability to work between the two and also cover the two at the same time. Mm-hmm. And because, well, we've got a rook pawn and I've got the bishop color I want, which doesn't hurt.
Right. No, it's a fantastic point. Actually, your bishop is the right color to prevent, well, both to help the pawn queen and to prevent the rook from playing a simple move on the file. So all the reasons you just said are good takeaways for any beginners at home. Bishops are better than knights in endgames, typically where there's a pawn race.
Mm-hmm. But
because
I'm not
of what
sure
John just said. What?
Answer to the second question. I'm not sure I know that.
Okay. Well, just to get, you can start thinking about that while I'm telling the viewers at home, like, what everything you just said was correct, right?
Okay.
Bishop versus knight, better in endgames when you have pawn races because of at least philosophically, whether the concrete details work out or not, what John said is true. A bishop can help your pawn push and prevent the others from pushing at the same time. If it's an open center, the bishop has the potential to attack things and defend things on both sides of the board. And in this particular case, that bishop is excellent because of the specifics we talked about. It's an A pawn, the same color as the bishop. So all those things would say, hey, the bishop is normally the much better piece here. And that doesn't necessarily change with the counterpoint I'm asking John to think about. But if you had to make a guess about what black might do here that kind of like takes away some of the power of that imbalance, bishop versus knight, what do you think it might be?
So if we're just talking moves, if I'm black in this position, I think a strong move here, without calculating it, is knight fd5, which is blocking that long diagonal of the bishop. And that's really weakening the bishop there.
Right. It takes away his power, right? Takes away his mojo.
Yeah.
Right?
What do you...
And in this particular position, you actually have no way to remove that pony.
Right.
Without a trade. Right?
Yeah.
So one thing, the counterpoint I was getting to that's like a good strategical abstract tip to keep in your head, that was kind of the point of this is, okay, we remember all these things about why the bishop is better for the knight, but if we're also looking ahead to those endgames and we're trying to think forest through the trees bigger picture, if your opponent has the ability to put a knight on like in the center and on the same color as that diagonal, often that's a very equalizing factor, and it can kind of change the way you think about the whole endgame. Now just putting a knight on that square doesn't do much, right? Because now it's not protected and it's vulnerable.
Right.
But the fact that they have the ability to block the diagonal and keep that knight protected is basically a game changer. Like, we basically don't evaluate this position other than the outside pass pawn for white as white having really any advantages. And then when you add the fact that you actually have some weaknesses over here, potentially, the position becomes very unclear, right? Black is a back rank freedom and a rook to an open file away from creating serious counterplay.
Right.
And so it's just like you kind of came, I think you came to a lot of these conclusions on your own, whether you're giving yourself credit for thinking about it abstractly like I'm explaining here or not. I think you did. And I just wanted to elaborate on that point to the members, like, look, know these bigger picture strategical piece of advice, because as you're calculating lots of stuff, it's like getting in the car and starting to turn the steering wheel. You don't know where you're going. Like, try to ask yourself those questions in a game. All right, what do I want here? What do I understand should be better for my position? Let's flex those muscles and let's suppress the things that should be good about the opponent's position. So studying endgames and improving your general knowledge of those things can be very useful to make those decisions. Otherwise, you feel like you're just calculating without really a bird on your shoulder saying, yep, what you're calculating is correct, or nope, what you're calculating is incorrect as far as your overall goals.
Right.
So, okay, so John played rook a5, fantastic move. A big stopping here for everybody, but remember, the point of these videos is long, in-depth analysis. We're giving John some serious hands-on training here. So now they play knight c4. I don't really see anything better for them. You're just threatening to take. You also have threats of knight e5 in a lot of these positions just because it asks a question to the bishop and opens your bishop. As well as the logical knight to d4 ganging up on the pawn. So, I can't really suggest a move like this in good conscience for black either, because, I bring the knight in, I gain a tempo, I threaten to come here. This looks like black has some problems.
Let me look at that. I think I thought about, not knight e5. I think there was another move that made that not so good.
Okay.
Just let me think if I can try to remember.
Okay. Maybe I was thinking knight e5 against this. Let me think. It seems like a pretty strong tactic, so if you came up with something concretely, that might have been it.
Yeah.
It's hard because we're really putting the pressure on you to remember what you calculated many moons ago.
Yeah, a couple days ago. Yeah, I don't recall. Maybe I was thinking knight e5. What I do know is I liked I liked go that they went c4.
Yeah, that's what I was getting to too. Is I like your position after they play knight to c4 as well. But I don't really have a lot of other suggestions for them. I don't know. I mean, I guess they could go. So what if they try to go for that same type of position, trade the c for the b pawn, and eventually have that nice coordinated effort on d5, the thing I just kind of talked
But
about as.
hold on, if they go there, what's stopping me from going knight takes hold on. Knight takes the pawn.
Well, at the end of that line, aren't we getting like the same kind of position we talked about?
Ah, yes, true.
So I think if they play knight a4, we should have another solution. I see two good moves.
Oh, I actually didn't calculate knight a4 at all. I didn't think about that. Huh.
Well, I think all the things we just talked about are being applied to here as far as why we wouldn't take on b5.
Right.
But you have two other good moves. One is c4. I
That
mean,
is,
the knight is now relying on the defense of the pawn. I mean,
hmm.
again, we don't have engines here, but that looks just winning on the spot. Honestly,
Yeah, that's true.
I think you're just winning the pawn outright because he can't take it. It's poisoned.
Yeah.
Um, I mean, that looks really strong. And also knight e5 again. This constant threat of gain a tempo on the bishop.
Hold
Ask
on.
him
Go
where he's
back.
going to put that
They
piece.
go knight a4, and suppose, let's see, we go c4.
Uh huh.
Let's see. What happens if they have the move, let's see, this?
So my first thought is the same line you probably looked at. Takes a4,
Right,
they
so
take
now they end up
a3.
with a bishop instead.
But that, like I said, my first line was the same line. Take a4, they take a3, and if you take a3, they get bishop takes c4. But I think there's a much better move here, an intermezzo before taking on a3.
Oh, is that this knight move?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. You attack the bishop, defend c, and now it's just
Oh,
over.
you got it. Okay, good
You're,
point.
you're going to end up with two passed pawns on the queen side.
Okay, so knight a4, okay, is somewhat similar, but they ended up.
So they played knight to c4. Now we've eliminated why they couldn't go knight a4.
They go knight c4. I didn't think about this too much. I
No, I think
thought
you
about
got to take it. I think yeah, it's just no other options, right? Taking on b5 with the rook loses a piece. It's a fork, so you know a fork on the rook and knight. You got to do something forcing. You made the right decision,
here.
and
Hold on
now
for a
again,
second.
so you've made that trade on c4.
Good to see her.
You've walked away from the computer. Just kidding. There's probably somebody more important there. Like I said, it's maybe Matt Damon just came in to help him with the algorithm behind him, right? Now's a good time for the Matt Damon impression, right? What is it? In the meantime, while I'm at it, why don't I just join the Navy, club a baby seal, and solve some code? What does he say in Good Will Hunting? I don't know. Your situation for you would be concurrently improved if I had $200 in my back pocket right now. That's what he's saying. But okay, we're gonna let John take a break just for a moment and talk about the position. What we'll do is we'll pause 10 seconds for station identification, and then we'll welcome John right back. All right, I think John just wanted a halftime break. You know how those football guys are, right? They're used to taking a break.
All my queens.
All right, remind everybody what they're watching here. John Urschel versus the world. Currently, he's doing very well versus the world, and we're right back here after the quick pause.
And
So
as a
again,
note-
we talked about it. So give us your thoughts here. I'll be quiet again. Tell me what your plan was. Anytime pieces are traded in the endgame, John, it's always important that we don't assume any previous evaluations or assessments are still applicable to the current position, right? It's like always being aware that if you're, just because we recognize a back rank problem, be aware that as soon as that goes away,
Yeah.
any tactics you might have calculated that justified a certain approach now go away too. So I think a common mistake people make is they don't pause to reflect on what has changed about the position enough when pieces are traded. So what was your evaluations of what's been changed here now that you've basically eliminated, honestly, your worst piece on the board? This was a huge win from a practical perspective because the knight is gone. And so what were your thoughts?
You don't understand how stoked I was when I got rid of that bishop. I mean, when I got rid of that knight.
Yeah.
That knight was like, I hated that thing.
Right.
Finally got it gone. And I'm telling you, like when we first started this video, I did not necessarily like my position. I loved my position here.
Right.
Like straight up loved it.
Right. Well, especially because just from a psychological perspective, you're thinking it's going to be hard to lose this now, right? I mean, like, I just eliminated the worst piece on the board. Best case scenario, maybe I end up getting a pass pawn over there. If not, this seems like a harder game to lose now, right?
Exactly. So right now, the one thing that I wanted to make sure was, so in this position, I'm going to get a pass pawn.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to make sure I get an outside pass pawn, the A pawn,
If you can.
if I can, not let them trade somehow the B pawn for my A pawn, but if
Right.
necessary, trade B pawn for the C pawn. But also, they're still back rank threats.
Right.
My move, knight E5, is still badass move. Opens the
Yep.
bishop on the long diagonal, attacking their bishop, which now threatens their ability to defend on B5. And
I love it.
yeah, so like
Dude, you're like,
I've
just like, you got a future in chess commentary. Um, okay, I agree on every level, everything you just described, so let's just keep going. I don't even need to add my thoughts, and 95 is a badass move. This is just tough, and now Black is worried. Like, okay, not that you would, but here's a good piece of advice for you. Like, and the same token of always being aware of how trades might affect your position negatively, be aware of potential, like, quick simplifications that your opponents may not see coming. I can't tell you how many times I've played, like, a really strong, it usually this happens against, like, a young kid, like, really strong FIDE master, right?
Mhm.
And they've, like, played me neck and neck the whole game, and they're just, they're right there. And what they end up missing, because they feel like they're close to a draw, is that you might be threatening weird things like, like a trade and then like a head to an endgame where like you just win because of like the outside pass pawn and it's
Right.
just over.
Mhm.
And the bishop is just better, right? So that may not even be the case here, but it's like that sort of thing is something that people can miss when they've been defending a position with a current set of features for a while. So always be aware of an ability to just go into a winning king and pawn ending or just go into a winning ending that was kind of out of the blue for someone to be considering.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how like you do it, but I mean, advice I've just read from reading books, and I forget which books said it, but like when you're playing in a game, or at least when I play a game, this is what I've been trying to do just to get better, is I start out, I'm playing the opening, I'm playing opening theory, and then finally when it's starting to leave my opening theory, I stop and I just sit on my hands and I really think and I say, okay, what is the middle game looking like? What am I trying to do? What are they trying to do? Like, what are my goals?
Right.
And then when it transitions into an end game sort of structure, I sit on my hands again and I say, okay, let's stop calculation for a second and like let's make new plans.
I love that. That is like the best thing you can do.
Yeah.
Absolutely. That is the best thing you can do. Even the strongest players in the world do that. Again, they may not have like an approach that is like starting with certain basic assessments like I would or like you would, but they're doing the same thing and you have to pause to reflect. And honestly, that's the reason why a lot of times you'll see them get up. I mean, just that we're all human beings, right? You'll see people, right at move 40. You'll always see Carlsen or Nakamura get up, take a breath, get some water, because there's a lot of emotion, there's a lot of adrenaline involved in chess, regardless of what people think. It's a very physically demanding game, and you gotta like pause, you gotta sit on your hands sometimes, literally, and take a moment to reflect. So that's fantastic. I love 95. I think bishop d5 makes sense for them basically just because of the threats you have. And I'm not even sure you're threatening to take and play rook a8. I think you might be threatening to take and play rook c5 and just gobble up the pawn, right? That seems like the most dangerous thing for black.
Yeah. Right, because they can't take the A pawn.
Right. So the fact that this bishop has been unleashed finally, right? We've been waiting for the gates to open. Now it's there. So bishop d5 makes sense. They're like, hey, worst case scenario, let's get rid of white's best piece. Let's go to the knight ending where my rook should be able to get one of these pawns back for this pawn and, have decent drawing chances even with a passed pawn.
Here's the thing. How do they get the pawn back?
It's not easy, but I'm saying that's probably partly what they're thinking, right?
Right.
Let's see. I mean, basically what they'd have to do if you took, which is what you did.
Yeah.
If they didn't go for the move that they did, which we're going to talk about how critical that was, and I'll tell everybody just how excited you were via text message. Let's just say I can't repeat all the things John said because they're not all PG.
This is
But
true.
he was pretty excited. But okay, so let's say they play rook c8. I'm going to point out that even though I'm not threatening to take it, this is potentially still a hard move for you to deal with. I actually do think there should be a way for black to get the pawn back. Just because these aren't connected passers who are helping each other move forward and protect, it's like you're gonna almost want to give one of the pawns in exchange for rushing forward with the other pawn, because from a practical perspective, why hold on to two ugly ducklings when you might be able to give one up? I mean, sorry for all the mothers out there. That's maybe a bad reference, right? All kids are beautiful. That's not what I mean, but you get what I'm saying, right? You might just want to rush forward here.
And this is what I was talking about before, is I always want to make sure that, yes, I'm probably going to give up one of those pawns, but to make sure I'm keeping that A pawn.
Right. Yeah, so you might go for something like this, and then they play here, and then you're like, hey, look, I could maybe try to find some way to defend this, but why do it? Give it up. And then, okay, so, this might have been a position that would have been better for them than what they chose in the game. But I'll be honest, I don't even know if it is. They might have made the right decision to sacrifice the piece, because I don't know if it was a sack for all those members who voted for it. But I honestly think that black is lost here. I think this endgame, I think this passed pawn is too much. And by the way, the sexy part of this is, no, I don't intend to take that back. I'm taking this thing, baby.
Right.
And now you're just lost, right?
Yeah.
And that means if you move the knight, what am I going to do? Am I just going to win another pawn? Am I, this knight is so dominant, I could probably even do something like this and just push. I mean, this just feels so good for white. That's exactly the kind of thing you would have been looking for if they went after the c-pawn, is give it up, rush this guy forward, and game on. So let's get back to that. So now we're finally catching up with the current position, and just so members know, me and John are going to make our move, his move. He's going to make his move live right in front of us.
Oh, wait, Danny, how much time do we have left?
That's a good question. We don't want to run out of time. I'm going to go and check on that right now. This is the current position. This is the current game. Let's refresh. You had 76 minutes when we started. You have 20. We got 26 minutes still.
Okay, we'll hurry up through these last couple of things, and then we'll.
Yeah, so we're good. And
okay, so takes A2. I was so happy.
Yeah,
although maybe,
like I said, hold up, my celly's blowing up. John's texted me.
I got so excited that tactic. I saw a tactic, like a good tactic.
Right.
And it worked.
And he did it. He executed. He played c4. Why is that so good, everybody? Because say goodbye to the bishop. There's no way to stop rook to b2 winning the piece. I mean, literally no way. And honestly, like I said, so now that we looked at the other endgame, I think the world's hand was getting pretty forced. So this is winning a piece. They ended up going for it, basically, whether it was a conscious decision or a blunder. Now that they have two pawns for the piece, getting us to this current position. This position here, John. I mean, like we said, we Tarantino'd it to start this video, and this is not a simple position to win. We got 20 minutes here. Okay. We need to pause and think about some things. We need to analyze deeply. This is the first time we've really had a chance to maybe really dive in together. Let's develop a winning plan and try to find out, where do we want our pieces? What pieces do we want? If a bunch of pawns and pieces start getting traded, what direction do we want to guide this game? Right? 2 pawns for the piece is a lot when we don't have a lot of material left. Right? I mean, we'd rather give up both of these pawns and just give ourselves an A pawn. Right? And then, because that's anytime you have an imbalance in a position, the chances of the pieces flexing their muscles over the pawns, everyone, that's how the pieces outplay the pawns, because they're a piece. But if you just have everything on one side of the board, it's going to take a lot of accurate technique for us to win this game. So I'm going to let you talk first. Tell me everything you're thinking about this position. What are your goals here if you could get them? Let's play imaginary chess. Put your pieces on the squares you want to have them on, and let's try to develop a winning plan.
Well, let's talk imaginary chess first.
Okay.
We talked about this before we went live with the video. I had to kind of learn a couple things that I didn't know. Like, I love the end game. It's my favorite part of chess. I think it's beautiful, but I didn't know things like what is winning, like a rook and a knight versus a rook. It's drawn easily. Or like a rook and a bishop versus a rook. is drawn theoretically, but it's extremely tough. And I
Right.
actually saw some things where I guess Anderson is famous for just winning those.
Right.
Yeah.
So those are two very important big picture observations. There's another big picture observation of an endgame that's not winning, despite a huge material advantage. You know what endgame I'm kind of foreshadowing?
Uh, Tell me because I'm not following completely.
So we've talked about two endgames that are basically a huge advantage that we know aren't winning: a rook and knight versus a rook,
Hmm.
a rook and bishop versus a rook that we probably take our chances.
Yeah.
If we had to
Like
choose,
our chance.
right?
So that tells us, at least in my mind, we're not trading that bishop for that knight.
Right. We don't want to.
Right.
Unless there's something, unless it comes with two pawns, or, unless it comes with some sort of other significant transition, I would agree with you.
Yeah. So
The
that's
other thing I'm looking for that I'm poking at is it's not going to be as relevant here because I imagine Black's plan will be to trade this pawn because Black also just wants to trade pieces here to draw.
yeah, of course.
But a good thing to know is that if you also have the wrong color bishop here to win this endgame,
Oh yeah.
right?
Hmm.
So if somehow Black is providing a combination that at first looks really, we're like, what? We're going up a piece and a bunch of pawns. Those are things to always keep in mind.
Yeah. And also,
So that's
this
also an endgame that wouldn't be winning if that's all we were left with.
it's probably not going to be relevant, but
Right, I agree. I was just kind of pointing it out.
no, I was going to say something else. Knight and bishop versus king by itself wins, but I don't think that's going to be relevant for us.
Right, that'd be great.
Yeah,
If
that'd
you
be
could do knight and bishop versus in a vote chess game, dude, you'd be a bad man. All right, we would be that would be amazing. Okay, so you've done that great job of giving us the bigger picture assessments of what you want, what you don't want. Where do you want all your pieces here? What's your plan? Why can't you take the h5 pawn in this position? Tell everybody
Yeah.
the answers
So
to those things.
thank you because I was initially thinking about taking the h5 pawn, and then Danny hit me up saying, you might want to look at it a little bit more, and I was getting a little bit too, gun happy there. But they can just trap me in with ideas like f5.
Right.
And now that rook is just completely passive, I might even lose it. It looks like I actually do lose it there. I was
You know what's
actually,
fun that I didn't point out, dude? I'm just seeing now is like this is kind of crazy, but just to point out,
yeah,
like this endgame also is one that only you could win.
huh,
The two pieces for the rook.
yeah,
Okay, like it seems like this is not gonna have enough winning chances. I mean, you know, they're gonna be able to protect, but just to point out, like this is also an endgame that holds no losing chances. And if this were a blitz game, like I would just grind this. Like you come up, your knight blocks the check.
right,
Your king gets to d4. You try to get into e5. I mean, like
yeah,
this is an endgame that would take defensive technique from Black to defend.
hmm
So I didn't even see that when you and I talked about h5 as you were just saying, but I just had to point that out because I was like, oh, that's kind of an interesting point.
yeah. But
But
the line that so we were talking about before they went, once they went f6, talking about f4 or f4, and if you go f4 and then you take the pawn, I don't think you lose the rook, but the rook just becomes passive.
right. Yeah, you would have the same option, but honestly, as you said, like the rook sitting on h4 as a safe square isn't really much of an option, right? That's
Yeah.
not fun.
So just
I
becomes
agree.
terribly passive.
Okay, so I like what you did then. So
Yeah.
let's stay with the live position. So if we're not taking h5 and we've solved that mystery
Yes.
for the fans at home, so what are our goals here? What's your major candidate move here and why?
Okay, so here's my candidates. So I can just start off. I mean, I say we calculate this through, we do some calculation, we make our move, and then we really make some serious plans when we have more time
Agreed.
because we're a little pressed on time. So I think things to just look at and be aware of. I love my knight right now. I think it's in a great spot. I don't think now's the time to try to do something with it. I think it's in a good place, putting pressure on some of the squares that their knight might want to relocate to.
Okay.
I think that our bishop right now is not quite doing much of anything on that diagonal, and I think their main weakness right now is that e6 pawn, and also another weakness that they have is their position is cramped. So I'm thinking about ideas of maybe we attack the e6 pawn. Maybe we go bishop h3. I've also been thinking bishop f3 attacking the h pawn and what that looks like after they go g6. Also, we have options to force the rooks off the board, but I'm not sure if that's something we want or not.
Well, I'll let you think about that then, because I think I do. That's a good teaching
That's
moment.
something to think about, though.
Yeah. What do you? I mean, what's your first instinct about whether or not that improves or worsens your winning chances?
My instinct is, let me look. My instinct is it's not good for me.
Okay, and why?
And my instinct is it's not good for me because, so I have a bishop and a knight and two pawns. There's four pawns and a knight. And the thing here is, I think it'll be too easy for them to trade some of those pawns away. And once I lose my two pawns, it's game over.
Right.
And
Winning chances are
my chances are gone. I don't think those type of positions. Also, I'm not even sure if this is relevant, but in some of these kind of positions where you're up a piece, I feel like these things really come into their own, where it's king versus king in pawns plus a piece, and you can use that piece to kind of force your opponent's king into making moves he doesn't want to.
Uh-huh.
Whereas that's not really relevant when it's two minor pieces versus one.
Absolutely. So all your instincts are correct.
Mm-hmm.
That is, and I can just say on a concrete level, that's 100% true here, that the rooks coming off the board are just going to make the draw, cakewalk for black. And in general, like to let that advice apply sort of universally in future situations, I will say that unless you have a concrete, and this is really cool, right? Because this is where it shows, John, that you're at the next level in chess. Beginners, as soon as they're up a piece, what are they hit over the head with? Trade, right?
Yeah.
Simplification kills the cat. And it's like a blanket statement that coaches give kids.
Mm-hmm.
But as you become better, you start to recognize advantages that are inherently smaller. So the approach and sometimes that dogmatic thought that we should be trading is actually very dangerous.
Mm-hmm.
And my general rule is that actually, if you have an advantage, you should not be trading unless you're 100% sure it increases the advantage with no real disadvantages given back.
Mm-hmm.
Because, I mean, you're in control. You're like the dictator. You don't want to give them anything, right? And specifically in advantages like this, usually if you have a piece they don't, keeping those other pieces that do things that their pieces do is going to help you while you improve this piece. Mm-hmm. Like these guys can balance out each other while you flex the muscles of the one piece they don't have, whether that ends up being here
mm-hmm.
and we trap the light squares, whether we try to poke at this and try to force G6 and then figure it out. I kind of like all those ideas. I listened to all your candidate moves.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of like this move a lot right now too. I had this dream of tricking them into doing something like this, and then I just like sit on the light squares and laugh in the face of danger. I get threats like this coming. The game is like over. Right. So I assume if we played bishop h3, they would have to play rook e8. I don't see allowing the bishop coming to e6 as a good thing.
Right.
And I think the moment we fix them doing this, now they put pawns on our light squares, and so we go f4 and like don't even think back, right? I mean, now we're like, maybe we're trapping pawns that we can then later try to relocate our bishop and target.
Yeah.
So those are like my thoughts. But everything you said about the rook is right, and it's a great tip at home for everybody.
Mm-hmm.
Just so you know, I've added a cool shot of our time counting down so people know we now have 14 minutes.
Okay.
So we're going to get this down to the last minute. It'll be really cool to
nice.
We got 14 minutes still, so let's keep calculating.
Okay.
So
one thing that we also need to look at is another way to put pressure on that leg square pawn is just rook b6.
Uh-huh.
So this is something to keep in mind.
I love this move. Let's calculate it.
Because if we calculate that and then they do something like, so they go rook b6 and say they go pawn e5, now we can just bring our bishop.
Boom.
Right, straight to d5.
I mean, this is literally lights out. This is resigned times because,
exactly.
Rook d8 loses on the spot.
Yes.
If they run with the king, I mean, maybe I'm exaggerating a little with resigned times, but this is so bad for black. This is where the pieces will go to work against the pawns. So that means I'm with you. So are we saying that this is an only move? If we can make them play only moves, so
Yeah,
then what would be our follow-up?
I think what I've been looking at is I've been thinking about it. I think bishop h3 or rook b6 is our move, and we have the same sort of game plan in mind. So the two moves
I
that we're
like it.
down to in the next 14 minutes is rook b6 and bishop h3.
So let's stick with rook b6 for now. Like let's stick with one. We just got to choose one.
Okay.
And I'll say that I kind of like rook b6 instinctively more first because for two reasons. One, I think that I'll put it this way. I think bishop h3 is definitely followed by rook b6 no matter what. We got to get both pieces there. I don't know that rook b6 is definitely followed by bishop h3. If they play some sort of weird move, we might have some advantages here. Maybe we simplify into the rook and bishop versus rook. Again, I don't want to trade too fast either, all the reasons we talked about. But that's a little bit different there because we're eliminating a knight, and that might help. I don't know. But also, this is a move. And, you know, okay, we have to calculate rook c8. Do we have, like, bishop b5, like, protects the knight, unleash again? I'm trying to create a scenario where my pieces are coordinating and poking at the weak light squares.
Take advantage of that advantage we have.
So let's look at rook b6, rook e8. Let's both just calculate this in silence. Moment of silence.
Okay.
Okay.
Give me 30 more seconds.
Go for it.
Okay. With this bishop c6 move, I'm not entirely sure that that is looking good for us after. I mean, something like rook e7. I'm not sure we've made any progress immediately with that.
Okay.
I think this idea of bishop h3 is still pretty strong here. I've also been thinking about how reduction of material looks for us. So I've been trying to just imagine in my head positions like, so we go bishop h3 here, and suppose they do go pawn e5. And now this is just hypothetical. And I want to look at this position and I say, okay, I want to imagine certain pairs of pieces off the board and say, how does that look for me? So first, I'm just trying to imagine the rooks and the knights off the board.
Okay.
How does this look? Our bishop is going to control the light squares, but I'm not sure. Our bishop controls the light squares. We try to activate our king. We're going to lose the h pawn. And I think we don't have winning chances there.
I think they're minimal. I think we have winning chances just because I imagine some lines where let's say we had a bishop on f5 and these pieces were gone.
Yeah.
I'm going to point out that even if they got this and we just gave them the pawn,
Mm-hmm.
the fact that you've like stuck to like a square might allow you to take some sort of slow plans that
Right.
eventually win anyway, despite really, as long as you can keep the f pawn.
Mm-hmm.
So, but I agree with you. It's actually very dangerous because I haven't calculated who gets to g5 first. Does his
Right.
king get there before we can win h4?
Mm-hmm.
You know, that would basically be the deciding factor. I don't know. So I would agree that we shouldn't be aggressive to simplify, but it doesn't mean we have no winning chances.
Right, but I'm thinking about just so that we have these things in mind, so we see
No, I
helps
agree.
us the most.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm just giving my feedback too. I think if they go for e5, we should go back to our original idea of like, hey, light square problems, right? We got 99 problems. Light squares are some of them. And no, seriously, I mean, like I think black wants to avoid that like the plague.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So amazing news. So first, I agree with you totally. I ended up dismissing bishop h6 because of the exact same move you did. I said, now what? And then I even went and looked at this. And I thought if we have to go for that silly line I suggested, rook c5 is actually super irritating, and they may have threats like g5. So as soon as I started seeing this, I was like, you know what? No bueno. So I ended up spending most of my time calculating this as well. We were on the same page. I had good news about why I was... At first, I started thinking, can I really just play f4 aggressively? Does that make my pawns a little far extended and weak? But then I calculated something that made me really confident it would just be good for us, which is that even if they go for this, we just have this move, just closing the door.
Oh yeah.
Like we don't even have to do anything else. We're gonna, if we can stop the rook from getting in,
Right.
you know, and if they're not getting there with tempo, okay, well, you know, maybe we just win. But even if we have to do this, I mean, just like, you know, say goodnight to any of your ideas. Like we're eventually gonna win this endgame. We have fixed the dark squares. We have killed counterplay, and these pawns are sitting ducks for our bishop. So I'm super confident that bishop h3 f5 that this. Okay, we're still going to have to calculate it if the world plays it, but I feel like from an intuitive perspective, this is something we want. So you know what that ends up meaning? That means their best move might have to be knight d8, and you can't tell me we're not thrilled if that's how they're playing, right? I mean,
Of course.
what should we do? We would have this move to consider, which threatens bishop takes e6 on the spot. We would have knight to d6 to consider. If they end up having to play these passive moves to deal with this straightforward plan you've come up with, rook b6 and bishop h3, I feel like I don't even know yet what the best move is on knight d8, but both knight d6 and rook b8 are screaming delicious things in my ear. So, let me check our time. We don't want to lose on time.
Oh.
We have 5 minutes.
Okay.
5 minutes officially before we have to make our decision. This is so exciting.
Yes. We're about to get our first W, perhaps.
Dude, this could be the first W. I mean, but what should we do after this? Like, maybe I should come and help you, like, with the Ravens. You got a position for me?
Yeah, man. You could just take a couple practices for me. Take some reps.
I'm not suiting up. No, I mean that's no. You know what we could do though? We should totally do like some sort of chess simul with the team. Like you could talk to because like you got like Mike Matheny doing all these baseball things with the Cardinals. Dude, if you told them like how good chess is for like the brain, that would just be such a good publicity stunt for them.
Well, you know, Harbaugh loves chess.
Does he really?
So like Harbaugh has been like asking me over the past since like late April or so, he's been asking me all these chess questions.
Right.
And just like he's trying to get better, and he's trying to get better to beat his brother mainly, and also so that like he can consistently beat his daughter.
Dude, just give him the hookup. Like give him my content. Seriously, like we should have you versus Harbaugh next.
Maybe not. I value my job.
Yeah, you'd cry. No, but seriously, like hook us up with him. We'll do a chess simul for the Ravens. It'll be a blast.
No, so for example, like I've been helping him with kind of like how you make plans in chess and how it's very similar to football in a lot of ways. You know, it's
right.
And also, you know, every once in a while he comes to me with some things like the one day he told me that like he didn't think the chess program he had like allowed him to castle. Like he thought it couldn't, like it just couldn't do that.
You're like,
I was like,
you're like, yeah, right,
"Oh, I
buddy.
think it probably can. And also things like he was telling me, well, like he moved his pawn 2 squares once, and then a pawn like took his pawn like behind it, and he was like mind blown.
Wow.
So I had to explain en passant to him, and
Amazing.
it was
Amazing. This you're like a professional chess coach. And dude, you're tell them that when they come after you for NFL commentary post retirement,
Mhm.
that you've already got your job reserved with chess.com for chess commentary.
Yes.
All right, so let's wrap up here. We have 3 minutes. We're counting down.
Hmm.
So let's wrap up here with 3 minutes counting down. John Urschel versus the world. It's happening right here, right now. We have spent the last hour or so, a little hour plus actually, analyzing this position in detail. You are up a piece, and the drum roll is now happening. The countdown is on. You have to decide what we're going to play here. We've spent a whole lot of time, people can check out the video, analyzing bishop h3 and rook b6, but all of our roads lead to Rome, essentially. We're looking to bind down the light squares, avoid simplifications that don't drastically improve white's position here, because black does have a couple pawns for the piece. And we're looking to increase our bind. So, John, I think it's time. I think we've analyzed enough.
All right, I'm ready.
And I'm gonna load up the time. I think we're probably down to a minute. A few minutes. That means we're literally under a minute. John, go ahead and make your move as we watch live. And this is the first time we've actually had a move being made. So
Okay, I'm going.
let me know once you've done it and click vote, and I will refresh so the world can see it's official. Here we go.
Here we
Are we
go.
moved?
I'm moved.
All right. That's it. We're refreshing. You chose rook to b6, and just like that, game on. Game on to the world. No longer a countdown. The countdown is on the world. 24 hours officially. John, this has been like maybe the best thing that's ever happened to both of us. I don't want to go out on a limb here. You know, I've had a couple of kids and gotten married, but this is right up there with top life achievements right now.
Oh, it's pretty high.
The pressure on the world, we're up a piece. This is still going to be really tough. We're not kidding ourselves. Winning this position, without allowing too much simplification by black trading pawns is going to be tough. But for those who want to see the full breakdown on everything we went into, real quick warning to the world: if they play rook e8, you better be ready for bishop h3, and all kinds of problems, all kinds of potential problems here. So. John, I'm gonna call our analysis session, Rab. You and I are gonna stay and have our private off-camera air session where we get to, talk back about your coach and your. I'm kidding, just kidding, John. Don't make him do any extra line drills or anything. Do you guys still do line drills?
What do you mean, like line drills?
Like I did line drills in high school where it's like suicides basically.
Oh yeah, no, we don't really do that.
You don't have to do conditioning anymore. Do you reach a level where you don't have to condition anymore as a pro football player?
No, it's like we do condition, but you condition on your own when you're at home, so you just show up in shape. Because it's not like high school football where you show up out of shape and like the coach like yells at you and
Right.
makes you run a ton. If you show up out of shape, they just fire you and then you're broke on.
And then you lose all your money.
Exactly.
So don't do that. That's a good pro tip for all the rookies out there from John Urschel. So, all right, man. Thanks for doing this awesome long session. Everybody needs to check out the full video for all kinds of tips, mainly from John. I mean, he's the guy really leaving us with some educational takeaways. So look for us to make more videos more often now that we're sort of up against the gun and into some critical moments. We're going to be analyzing the position. No more than a couple days will go by before we really break down where this is headed because we want to win. Right, John?
Exactly.
All right. Get back to the Goodwill Hunting chalkboard there, and we'll analyze after we see what the world does.
Sounds good.